They say fashion is all about appearances, but in my experience, it's the things we don't see that make the biggest impact. My name is Isabella Martinez, and while most of the world saw me as a quiet seamstress with a tiny shop, they had no idea I was orchestrating one of the biggest takeovers the fashion industry had ever seen. The setting was Milan Fashion Week Gala Night. A sea of couture, carefully curated press, and champagne-sipping elites floated around the grand ballroom. From a quiet corner, I watched my aunt, Victoria Sterling, bask in the attention of fashion's elite. Her label, Sterling Couture, had long been considered the epitome of old-world luxury. She wore power like a gown, loud, overstated, and impossible to ignore. "Darling, you simply must see our new collection," she cooed to a Vogue editor, voice dripping with self-importance. "We're redefining luxury for the modern era." What she didn't know, what almost no one knew, was that while she was busy clinging to outdated silhouettes and traditional fashion formulas, I had spent the last decade building Casablanca, a quiet powerhouse disrupting the very industry she claimed to lead. My brand had become synonymous with innovation, sustainability, and forward-thinking design. We had labs developing fabric technology in Tokyo, R&D workshops in Paris, and sustainable production lines in Italy. But to the public, Casablanca was a mysterious label run by an anonymous genius. And to Victoria, I was still Isabella the seamstress, her niece with a cute little dressmaking hobby. "Isabella," Victoria's voice sliced through the room. She waved me over with a too-wide smile. "Come show everyone your little project." I approached in a deceptively simple black dress, one I had designed myself. The seams were nearly invisible, the fabric responsive to body heat, adapting slightly to temperature and movement. Years of research had gone into it, but to her, it probably looked plain. "My niece," she announced to the group, "runs a tiny artisan shop. Very traditional." There was a pause, just long enough for her to let the condescension sting. "How interesting," murmured a fashion journalist. "With all the fast fashion these days, it's nice to see someone preserving the old ways." Victoria's smile tightened. "Yes, well, Isabella's always been rustic. I even offered her a job once. Thought perhaps she'd outgrow hemming sleeves and learn real fashion. But alas," I smiled, biting back every truth I could have said in that moment. That Casablanca had sold out its last 5 collections. That our margins were 3 times higher than Sterling Couture's. That we'd just acquired all of Sterling's outstanding debt under several shell corporations. That tomorrow morning, Casablanca would publicly finalize its acquisition of Sterling Couture. Instead, I said, "Everyone has their place in fashion, Aunt Victoria. Not all of us can be visionaries." She didn't catch the sarcasm. "Precisely. Vision requires legacy, experience, the right family." I glanced around at the room full of editors and investors. Many of them already knew. The press embargo was set to lift at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Her runway show started at 10. One journalist leaned in. "I've heard rumors Sterling Couture is struggling financially. Any truth to that?" "Utter nonsense," Victoria replied, brushing the air. "We're in talks with major investors, actually. Our next chapter will be our strongest yet." I could barely hold back a smile. "That's good to hear." I was under the impression last quarter's numbers were concerning. Her eyes narrowed. "And where would a seamstress hear those numbers?" I shrugged. "People talk while being fitted." She turned away with a dismissive laugh, already moving on to more flattering conversations. "Perhaps you can help with some last-minute alterations," she tossed over her shoulder. "We'll pay your usual modest rate, of course." That was always her favorite jab, reminding me I didn't belong in her world. But tomorrow, she would find out she'd been living in mine all along. The morning of the Sterling Couture runway show arrived bright and clear. I stood outside my aunt's fashion studio in Milan at exactly 7 a.m., watching the scene unfold through the glass. Models fluttered around in silk robes, stylists sparked orders, and interns tripped over steaming machines and garment racks. Inside, Victoria was in rare form, storming from one station to another, correcting every detail. "No, no, no," she snapped at an assistant. "The sequins must catch the light just so. This isn't a department store runway. This is Sterling Couture." She didn't notice that half the room, her head of PR, the CFO, even her production manager, kept glancing nervously at their phones. They'd been warned. At precisely 9 a.m., the press embargo would lift. Casablanca's acquisition of Sterling Couture would go public, and Victoria's reign would change forever. "Isabella," she called, spotting me. There you are. Come, observe how real fashion is created. But do try not to get in the way. We have no time for amateur interruptions. I smiled, serene. Of course, I'm just here to learn. You could have been part of all this, you know, she sighed dramatically. But instead you chose to hide in your little workshop. I didn't respond. What could I say? That I'd already orchestrated 3 Casablanca shows this week under a pseudonym? That the label she mocked was about to become her new employer? My phone buzzed in my bag. PR team. Financial media's live. Fashion blogs picking it up. 30 minutes. To full blast. Victoria was still lecturing the room about the spirit of couture when her PR director tiptoed over. Miss Sterling, she whispered, there's some chatter online. About ownership. Big chatter. Probably excitement about the show, Victoria said, waving her off. Make sure last night's gala photos go out, especially the ones with Vogue. It's not about the show, the director insisted, voice tighter. It's about Sterling Couture. Reports of a significant acquisition. Victoria froze. What acquisition? That's ridiculous. We've been approached by investors, sure, but actually, I said, softly, checking my watch, there has been an acquisition. It'll be official in about 13 minutes. She turned to me sharply. What are you talking about? Perhaps, I said, gesturing toward her office. We should speak in private, in her gilded office, surrounded by glossy portraits of herself and awards for lifetime achievement in design. I handed her a printed press release. She read the headline aloud. Casablanca acquires iconic fashion house Sterling Couture in industry-shaking merger. Her lips barely moved. Casablanca? She whispered. They're behind this? But they're the most innovative brand in the industry. Their fabric technology, those designs, they've redefined everything. We have, I said, and we will continue to. Her eyes lifted slowly from the page. What do you mean we? I founded Casablanca, I said calmly, 10 years ago. That little dressmaking shop you've always sneered at? It's our experimental R&D lab. We've been testing fabrics, new design techniques, and structural patterns there for years. It was never about retail, it was about creation. Her jaw dropped. You? But how? The capital? The reach? You turned down those opportunities. When they came knocking at your door, I replied, I picked them up, quietly, strategically. Every time you dismissed a partnership or modern idea, I took it and built something better. Her hands trembled as her phone began to buzz, media requests pouring in. Beyond the office walls, we could hear the rising murmur of confusion. Someone cried out in the hallway. It's true. Casablanca owns Sterling. You lied to me, she breathed. No, I said. I simply let you see what you wanted to see. A niece with a needle and thread. Not the woman who was changing the entire fashion landscape beneath your nose. But why now? Because Sterling Couture has heart. It has heritage. You taught me some of that, and I respect it. But your ego, your refusal to evolve, that's why your company nearly collapsed. This acquisition isn't a hostile takeover. It's a lifeline, one you didn't even know you needed. Her CFO burst through the door, panic in his voice. Victoria. It's all over the news. Casablanca, they own controlling shares. Our stock is up. The press is calling. What do we say? Victoria looked between us, eyes wide with disbelief. I've been speaking with Casablanca's founder, she said, slowly, voice barely above a whisper. Apparently, she's also my niece. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of headlines, investor meetings, and stunned industry reactions. Fashion's greatest revelation. Casablanca founder unveiled the seamstress who bought an empire. Sterling Couture. A new era begins. Some reports celebrated me. Others were more skeptical. But one thing was undeniable. The fashion world had changed overnight. Sterling Couture's board at first panicked, quickly recognized the truth. This acquisition wasn't the end of their legacy. It was their rescue. The financials told a compelling story. Casablanca had tripled the margins, nearly no debt, and a brand image that was both sustainable and cutting edge. Victoria, for all her initial fury, had gone quiet. We met in her office a week after the announcement. She looked tired but composed, wearing a muted navy suit rather than one of her usual embroidered gowns. Her face was unreadable. Let me guess, she said, sipping tea. You've come to fire me. No, I replied, sitting across from her. I've come to offer you something better. Her eyebrow arched. Humiliation in front of the industry wasn't enough. I didn't humiliate you. I said firmly. You did that to yourself every time you dismissed new ideas. Every time you used condescension to hide insecurity. She set the cup down, but said nothing. I want you to stay on, I continued, as creative director of a reimagined Sterling line, a sub-brand under Casablanca. You have an incredible eye for classical silhouettes. I have the infrastructure, the technology, the global network. We could build something extraordinary. And you'll be what? My boss? I smiled. Your partner. She studied me for a long time, her pride warring with pragmatism. This isn't how I imagined passing the torch, she finally said. Neither did I admitted. But here we are. You can walk away in bitterness, or you can help shape the future of fashion. A long pause. Then slowly, Victoria nodded. I'll stay, she said, but only if I can still critique your hems. I wouldn't expect anything less. That fall, we unveiled our first collaborative collection, Sterling by Casablanca, a line that married the timeless luxury of Sterling couture with the innovative fabrics and construction Casablanca had pioneered. The runway show was held in Paris, under the domed glass ceiling of the Palais Garnier. I walked the venue with Victoria hours before the event, watching as technicians adjusted lighting and seamstresses made last-minute fixes backstage. You remember this place? She asked. First show I ever watched was here, I said. I was 17. You were debuting your Versailles line. She smiled faintly. You stood in the back row, in a dress 2 sizes too big, and heels I could barely walk in. I thought you'd give up, she said. I thought you'd realize fashion wasn't for you. I met her gaze. You were wrong. She nodded just once. That night, our collection received a standing ovation. Critics called it a masterclass in reinvention, a seamless blend of heritage and future, and the most inspired collaboration in decades. And for once, Victoria didn't try to steal the spotlight. She let me stand center stage. A month after the show, the Sterling by Casablanca collection was sold out across luxury retailers. Orders flooded in from Tokyo, Milan, New York, and Dubai. Waitlists stretched for months. Critics and customers alike were enchanted not just by the clothing, but by the story behind it. For the first time in my life, people saw me, not as Victoria Sterling's overlooked niece, not as the anonymous shop girl running a quaint boutique, but as Isabella Martinez, visionary, designer, business leader. And yet, amid the success, I felt a strange mix of triumph and something else, something quieter, a tugging sense of unfinished business. One evening, I visited the old workshop. The storefront I used to call my dressmaking shop still stood on a quiet Paris street. Our R&D team now used it as a think tank for experimental silhouettes and sustainable fabrics. Inside, the hum of machines and the sharp scent of pressed wool greeted me like an old friend. My favorite sewing machine, an antique Singer handed down by my grandmother, still sat in the corner. I ran my fingers over it, remembering her voice. Mija, every stitch carries a story. Make yours count. She never got to see what Casablanca became, but she planted the seed. Every time she showed me how to reinforce a hem or line up a print with precision, she was preparing me for a world that wouldn't hand me a place. I'd have to stitch it together myself. I left the workshop that night with a new idea. Not a fashion line, a foundation. We launched the Martinez Initiative 3 weeks later. Its mission? To provide mentorship, workspace, and startup grants for underrepresented young designers around the world, especially women from immigrant and working class backgrounds. We partnered with design schools in Colombia, the Philippines, Morocco, and inner-city La. Casablanca's research team provided training, while retired Sterling seamstresses taught masterclasses in couture techniques. Even Victoria volunteered to lead a workshop in Rome. Don't look so surprised, she told me dryly. Old dogs can still teach brilliant tricks. The media picked up the story quickly. Vogue, Elle, and Forbes ran features not just on our clothes but on our values. Casablanca was no longer just a brand. It was a movement. Then came the award season. At the Global Fashion Awards in London, Sterling by Casablanca was nominated for Best Innovation in Luxury Design, Best Brand Transformation, and Designer of the Year. Victoria and I attended together. She wore one of our signature pieces, an embroidered midnight blue gown with solar reactive threads. I wore something simpler, a sleek ivory pantsuit made from recycled silk and reinforced by a biodegradable polymer we'd developed in-house. When they announced Designer of the Year, I held my breath. And the winner is. The presenter paused, glancing at the card. Isabella Martinez, founder of Casablanca. Applause erupted. Victoria squeezed my hand, eyes damp. You earned this, she whispered. As I stepped onto the stage, the lights blazing and cameras flashing. I thought about all the years I'd been overlooked, underestimated, mocked, told I was just a seamstress. But the seams had held. They'd built something unshakable. Thank you, I began, looking out over the crowd, for seeing me, for seeing beyond the label. Because fashion isn't just about what we wear, it's about the stories we tell, and who gets to tell them. And now, finally, it was my turn. The morning after the awards, I found Victoria sitting on the rooftop terrace of our Paris headquarters, sipping espresso and flipping through the latest press coverage. The skyline behind her glowed in the soft lavender haze of dawn. She didn't say anything at first, just slid a copy of Women's Wear Daily across the table. The seamstress who stitched an empire, the headline read. Underneath, a photo of me at the podium, smiling, finally seen. Victoria raised an eyebrow. Quite the legacy you're building, Isabella. I smiled. Not just mine, ours. It was true. Sterling by Casablanca had become more than a successful brand. It was a symbol of what fashion could be when tradition met innovation. Victoria's classical training blended perfectly with Casablanca's forward-thinking ethos. Together, we had redefined luxury. I almost missed it, she said softly. All those years, I thought power came from controlling the spotlight, but it was always about creating something that lasts. You did that, even when no one was watching. I nodded. I learned from the best, even if they didn't always know they were teaching me. She gave a small laugh, rueful but proud. Your grandmother would be proud. A breeze passed between us, lifting the edge of the magazine. We let it drift into silence, both of us, understanding how far we'd come, not just in business, but as women, as family. A few months later, I was invited to give the keynote at the International Design Forum in Tokyo. As I stood backstage, I watched a group of young women in the audience, clutching notebooks, eyes bright with hope. It reminded me of my first fashion conference, where I sat quietly in the back, dismissed by nearly everyone, except one aging seamstress who told me, make your own table. Don't wait for a seat at theirs. I built that table. Now I was helping others do the same. Today, Casablanca isn't just a fashion house. It's an ecosystem, a mentorship platform, a legacy. Our community programs have helped launch over 300 new designers into the industry, many from the same backgrounds that once kept doors closed. Victoria often tells students, Isabella taught me that success doesn't always shout. Sometimes it works quietly in a corner workshop, sewing something the world will one day wear. We still keep the original dress shop. It's our R&D lab, our tribute to the roots. The sewing machine my grandmother gave me sits there oiled, polished, and still humming with promise. Sometimes, when I visit, I run my fingers over it and smile. It reminds me where I started, and how far I've come. Last week, I received a letter from a former rival brand's executive. He wrote, I used to mock your little brand. I thought you were naive. Now I study your playbook. Thank you for showing the world that greatness doesn't have to look loud, it just has to be real. There's a quiet kind of revenge in that, not petty, not bitter, just deeply satisfying, because in the end, I didn't destroy Victoria's empire. I built something better, and I brought her with me. We didn't just change a company. We changed the industry, and every time someone calls me just a seamstress, I smile and think, yes. And look what I stitched.